some serious tennis players. I don't have to see how everyone is doing. Just for those of you that want to know, on here, I will be in Dallas at the UTR kind of sectionals, pre-nationals in Dallas this weekend. I'll be seeing most of you at Orange Bowl or Eddie Herr. Yeah, this is actually pretty exciting. I mean, all the names here. Nirav, you have quite a group of young ballers here. I see a couple definite future Stanford players that I can think of.
These are all of the people that are living the dream that I was trying to pursue when I was their age, and I couldn't hack it, but I'm glad they can.
Exactly. I mean, it's pretty wild. Well, this is probably a double benefit for me, because I get to actually talk to one of my best friends, groomsmen, mentors, confidants, someone who's honestly represented all of the kind of ICL mantra, of inspire, educate, and having an impact. So much so that Nirav was actually one of our first ICL board members. We're dating ourselves. I know we look young, but we're
2005. Yes,
we're going back early. I think Nirav was a speaker. I think came to some Dare to Dream conferences, and to see kind of everything come full circle, and to have him here, much better in person. But we're probably going to be a familiar face that you see more often as he continues to create great companies, and I keep pulling him more back to the roots of blending education with sports and character and service. So Nirav's resume is pretty outstanding since I met him. Really, first of all, a great athlete. I'd say the highest priority is a great dad, husband, athlete, and entrepreneur. Probably even. He's quite amazing on television, on lots of appearances. We're always proud of him, but most proud of really the support that he's shown. And so really to be able to walk through his journey and bring it all kind of full circle with ICL. So I will say thank you and welcome Nirav Tolia here.
Well, I'm so excited to be here, and all of you are so fortunate to be part of what Kirk has created, and what I've seen him pour his passion and many sleepless nights and lots of elbow grease into over the last couple of decades. And I'm really very grateful to be involved and to have been involved for quite some time. And I'm really proud to be a part of the extended ICL family, and what you guys have created, because now it's not just Kirk, it's all of you. It's something really remarkable. And not only is it very special in regards to ICL itself, but I think it's a great model for where the future is going. Being able to pursue a talent like you guys do, as well as continue your academic career and put yourself in a position where you can really focus on this thing that you're great at, while at the same time not making any compromises in your education. That's something that when Kirk and I grew up, it wasn't really possible. It was very difficult, if even likely at all. And so the fact that you guys are able to do it, props to you for making those sacrifices, and props to Kirk for creating the program. And I'm thrilled to be a very small part of it.
Well, you know what, I should probably give a little bit of a background for those of you that don't know Nirav. He actually he is from West Texas, home of Friday Night Lights. He was not QB1, but he was a great tennis player.
Let me tell these guys the funny story, because I don't even know if you've heard it. So as Kirk mentioned, I grew up in West Texas, Odessa, Texas. And that is the place, if you've ever heard of the TV show or the movie or the nonfiction Pulitzer Prize winning book, Friday Night Lights, it was written about my high school, Odessa Permian, and the city of Odessa. And the theme of the book was how, in many ways, sports can bring people together, can create community, can inspire young people, and really not just young people, but their entire fan bases, and can create a cause that's bigger than any one individual, which is something that really formed the basis for me of what I'm passionate about in business. I think business is all about teams that come together and aim for a goal that's larger than any of the individuals. And that's a lesson that I learned honestly in Odessa, Texas. I was a football player growing up because everyone's a football player growing up. And when I was in junior high playing tackle football, I got injured, as many people do playing tackle football. And my two Indian physician parents, and particularly my mom, who is all of 5 feet tall, but a real spitfire, said, okay, you're not playing football anymore. You're going to play tennis. And I thought to myself, well, I like tennis, great sport, love watching it, love playing it. But man, you're really going to cut into my social standing here if you prevent me from playing football and you switch me to tennis. And yet she gave me no choice. And my dad felt the same way. And so in one summer, I was prevented from playing football. I started to play tennis. I was so passionate at the time about trying to be great at something that I begged my parents to send me to Nick Bollettieri's tennis academy. And this was the late 80s. And I went to Bollettieri's and I did what many of you guys are probably doing, training in Florida, which is, I think, probably the most difficult conditions in the whole country. You got 100% humidity, it's 100 degrees outside. I remember at Bollettieri's, we used to hide over the weekends because we didn't want to have to be forced to go do the drills. It was too hot and we were too tired. But by the time I came home to Odessa, after going through all of that rigor, I could basically crush everyone in my backyard because they just weren't used to the adversity. They weren't used to playing at that level. And a funny story about Bollettieri's, the first day I showed up, I go out on the court and there are 4 giant trash cans in the 4 corners of the court. And I'm looking out there and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what those trash cans are for. I mean, do they want me to serve and do a kick serve in a way so I can bounce the ball into the trash can? Or is that a target? Or is there something we're going to do? And Kirk, you probably can guess what the trash cans were for. You were not allowed to leave the court until you had emptied your innards, i.e. thrown up in pretty much all 4 of the trash cans. So that was my introduction to Bollettieri's. So I get back to Odessa. I had a really fun high school tennis career. I was ranked, I think my highest ranking was 14 in the state of Texas. This is back when you had 14s, 16s, 18s, et cetera. And then I go to Stanford for college. And of course, I wanted to play tennis at Stanford. And that year they had recruited number 1, number 2, and number 3 in the country. Number 1 at the time in the country was a guy named Michael Flanagan from Dallas, Texas, which is where I live now. Interestingly, his son goes to the same school that my kids go to. So very, very small world. Anyway, they recruited all those kids that were a lot better than me. And I realized pretty quickly that the difference between being 14 in Texas and being 1, 2, or 3 in the country was not losing a match 4-4 or, playing it close, but, having a couple breaks go against you. I mean, it was a nonlinear difference because, as you guys know, as you get to the highest level, it's not linear. It's not that, people who are ranked twice as high as you are twice as good. They're typically 8 to 10 times better. And the people who are twice as highly ranked as them are not twice as good. They're like 50 times better. And so I went to the coach and I said, hey, can I walk on to the team? This was Dick Gould, legendary Stanford tennis coach. And he said, I'll tell you what, we do have a spot. It's the number 8 spot on the team. As you probably know, only 1 through 6 count. So those are my scholarship players. 7 and 8 don't get scholarships. They're typically walk-ons. And if you can go and beat my number 1 woman, I will give you a chance to walk on. And I was really sort of insulted. And I thought to myself, what is this guy talking about? And sure enough, I go out and I play the number 1 female player at Stanford, and she just destroyed me. And that was it. That was the end of it for me. And it was an important lesson because one of the themes that I wanted to bring to you guys today is that I'm a very strong believer in optimism, positivity, attitude reflects leadership, all of that stuff. And so I wake up in the morning with a smile on my face. I am a glass half full kind of person. And I found that that's come in handy my entire life. All of that said, what I wanted to bring to you guys is the moments where I've learned the most in my life, the moments where I feel like I've had the most personal growth have always been moments of failure or struggle or adversity. And the reality is success is not a great teacher. And it's something I want you guys to remember. On the other hand, failure is a really good teacher, because I bet if I asked you competitive athletes, what do you remember about the last time you won? There wouldn't be a lot. But if I asked you, what do you remember about the last time you lost? You would be able to tell me every single thing you did wrong and how you were going to fix that in the future. And so there is a paradox when we think about achievement and accomplishment and doing our best. And that paradox is it takes failing to give us the opportunity to get back up and really show what we're all about. And so I know all of you guys are 99% successes, but when you have those 1% struggles, when you have those 1% of not ringing the bell the way that you like, I hope you embrace the fact that those are the moments when you can really look in the mirror and think about who you are and who you're going to be and what it's going to take to get there. Because if I think about tracing my life back, and I shared with you in a funny way a story, but living it was really hard. It did feel like a failure. It felt like a failure to not be able to play football anymore. It felt like a failure to get to Stanford and not be able to play tennis. And yet those failures forced me to think more deeply about what was important to me and what I wanted for myself and how hard I needed to work to get there. And so just to very quickly finish what Kirk said, which is a quick introduction, I get to Stanford. And again, it's a little bit, when I look back on my life, it's a story of failures that then gave way through incredible luck and timing and really just blessings from people like my parents and other mentors to, eventually a place where I never expected I was going, but I was happy to ultimately be there. I get to Stanford. I was a pre-med. As I mentioned, both my parents are doctors. Today, my brother, my only sibling, is a doctor. His wife is a doctor. I'm not a doctor. Everyone in my family is one except for me. And when I was a pre-med student at Stanford, it didn't come easy to me. And I was used to school coming very easy. And I had never really taught myself how to study because I didn't have to study that much going to Odessa Permian. So I get to Stanford, and not only am I not playing tennis, but I'm just getting destroyed academically. And I'm questioning myself. My ego is crushed. My whole identity was wrapped up in tennis and academics, and I couldn't do tennis, and my academics were not where I wanted them to be. And so ultimately, I had to admit that being a doctor was not in the cards for me. And it was a tough thing for me to come to terms with. It was a tough thing for me to tell my parents about. Again, it was my identity. It was the thing that it was the clothes that I wore to mask all those insecurities that I had and that we all have. And when that set of clothes was ill-fitting, I had to figure out how to find a new pair. And so I lucked into business as something that I was passionate about, but knew nothing about. And in particular, I lucked into being in Silicon Valley during the very beginnings of the dot-com boom. And I met these two grad students at Stanford who had started a little company called Yahoo, which I'm sure you guys have never even heard of because it's
Google it. You guys should Google it.
Is essentially gone. But back in the mid to late 90s, this was the most powerful, the most successful, the most beloved internet company in the world. And I was lucky enough to join as an early employee. And so I went from not being able to go to med school, which was my dream, to joining a company called Yahoo, which I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Yoo-hoo, the chocolate milk company. Everyone in Odessa thought that I was a milk delivery man. They thought that the bright young kid who had gone to Stanford University had not been able to hack it and was now delivering milk. But that little company, Yahoo, ended up going public. My stock options became worth some money, and I was on my way. 3 years after seeing Yahoo go from 84 employees to over 10,000 and about $100 million in value to 100 billion, I decided, it's sort of easy. Let me see if I can do it myself. So in 1999, I started my first company. That company also had some extremely rough moments, some massive failures that were public, fights, lawsuits between the founders, all kinds of nasty stuff, layoffs, taking the company from hundreds of people to almost 30. So, I mean, really, really rough stuff during the dot-com bust, and many, many, many nights when I was curled up in fetal position, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. but ultimately we persevered. In 2004, that company went public. 2005, it was bought. And that's when I decided to take a little break, and I moved from Silicon Valley to New York. I met Kirk. It was 2004, 2005, 2006. And I really was able to take a few years and recharge my batteries, learn about a different part of the country, and experience a little bit of a renaissance because I wasn't working. I was just focused on meeting people and having new experiences, and really, as I said, recharging my batteries for the next adventure. That next adventure started in, I think, around 2008. I started my second company. That company was a failure. You're noticing a trend here. And after raising $10 million for that company, which was going to be a sports-based internet website.
Love that company. I'm still on it.
We went to give the money back to our investors because it wasn't working. And we'd spent 2 years banging our heads against a wall, not making anything stick. And the investor said, look, you got a really good team. You know, it comes back to that theme I talked about at the very beginning of team. And why don't you see if you can come up with a new idea? That was the summer of 2010. And that was the summer we came up with the idea for a company called Nextdoor, which I feel is not only my greatest professional achievement, but the thing that I'm most passionate about because it has purpose. It has a mission well beyond just making money. It does make money, a lot of money. The company went public in November of last year, multi-billion-dollar market cap, very successful. 99% of American neighborhoods use Nextdoor. It's also used in 11 other countries around the world. And it has given me tremendous amounts of joy because it's a service that really helps people. It brings back a sense of community to the neighborhood and uses technology to do that. So last part I'll tell you, and then, you know, we'll let Kirk ask me questions, or I'd be very happy to take your questions as well. A couple of years ago, I have 3 young boys, and I decided that if I wanted to be a CEO forever, I'd already been one for 20 years. That path was available. But if I wanted to be a father, and if that's really what I want to prioritize, it might make sense for me to take a step back. And so I graduated from CEO to chairman of the company. And my wife and I decided to do something really crazy. We took our 3 young boys and we moved to Florence, Italy, so we could have a family adventure together. In the middle of that adventure, COVID hit. So that's a side story about some adversity. If you remember, COVID was particularly nasty in Italy in its early days. But we had a phenomenal experience in Italy as a family. And it was, again, an opportunity for us to recharge our batteries and have a new shared experience, the 5 of us, my wife and I, and our 3 young boys. And I got to do a lot of fun things over the last couple of years, not operating Nextdoor, including being on Shark Tank, which was really fun. As a judge, most of the time when I tell people I'm on Shark Tank, they say, oh, you went and pitched your companies on Shark Tank. And I say, no, I wouldn't do that. That would be way too nerve-wracking, but it was fun to be an actual shark. And so with that, you know, I would love to riff with whatever, Kirk, you would like to riff on. But most importantly, I would love to, you know, talk to the students and give you guys anything that you can use to continue to get where you're going. And, you know, just to close again, I'm so inspired by all of your journeys. I wish that I had the opportunities that you have, and I know you'll go on to do great things. And so don't forget to do it in a way that it benefits not just yourself, but the rest of the world, because that's the kind of legacy that when you're old like me, you'll look back and feel really good about.
So that, I mean, first of all, thank you for that. That's the best intro that we've heard. It kind of covered a lot of different bases. You know, underlying the surface, I think harping on the themes you talked about, that, you know, every athlete, there's no such thing as anyone that's ever won every match or failed. So to really be able to focus, and that's why at ICL, as you know, we go deep into the character development, because you can memorize stuff, you can get perfect scores on your SATs, but there are always levels to achieve. And part of it is your own personal journey, right? Like you probably could never have mapped out in a million years, like what your path would be. And in those dark times to, you know, I guess I'll jump straight into the perseverance part, because, you know, sharing your story, it's so cool. We've had, on a side note, before I go into perseverance, there's some people on here that have asked me and said, Mr. Spahn, can we pitch ICL on Shark Tank? And I said, I wish I could, but the fact that I know a shark, I think disqualifies me from bringing it in there. But I was supposed to throw out the idea for you to pitch to your buddies in Dallas of a celebrity Shark Tank for social good and for maybe
I like it. No, I like it. It's a great idea. I mean, you always come up with great ideas, Kirk. And one thing I want to mention, because you brought it up, there is a very important trend in the business world. And that trend is one where business leaders are starting to wake up to the fact that profits are not the only things that their stakeholders care about. And you're going to hear about this a lot more. It's this idea that corporations can be a great vehicle for change. In fact, many business people believe that companies can be the greatest vehicles for change because they mobilize so many people and they have so much impact. If you think about the brands that have the greatest footprints today, you think about Nike, you think about Apple, you think about Tesla. These are companies that are influencing millions, if not billions of consumers. And if they take the tact that it's important for them to not just sell and make money, but it's important for them to leave the world in a better place and to operate in a way that reeks of integrity and service and gratitude. Well, I think that's actually good for their shareholders too. It's not just good. It's not just good for them. It's good for everyone. And so the fact that Kirk has had this dream of having world-class athletes with a world-class education, but then having this third leg of the stool, which is world-class character, I cannot tell you how timely it is, how valuable it is, and how lucky you guys are, because honestly, when I was growing up, there was no talk about this in my school. Of course, you heard things like don't lie, cheat, steal. I mean, that's obvious. But the idea that character and not just what you do, but how you do it is critical to judging your success or failure, that's something that I think is of our generation. And it's something that, even when my wife and I chose the school that our children go to in Dallas, it's an academically rigorous school. It has great academics, but it's all about character. Because ultimately we believe that if our kids have a foundation of kindness and gratitude and service, those things will propel them to success in any field that they choose. And so now perseverance and, getting to what Mr. Kirk said about in those dark moments, what do you do? And I see one of the questions that was already asked, how did you really get over those obstacles and failures? Like, what was your mindset in those situations? There's a great quote, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And, I don't want to give you pithy answers, but I do want to give you a few things that you can take away. And one of them is failure is a great teacher, as I mentioned. The second one is don't worry about getting the whole thing right all at once. Just focus on getting up the next day and going. Don't quit, right? If you quit, you're done. You're absolutely you cannot come back from quitting, right? But if you just get back up when you're knocked down and just make it to the next day, typically by the end of that next day, you'll realize it's not as bad as you thought it was. You get a little bit of your mojo back, and then you slowly but surely build on that. And in the tech industry, we have this concept called compounding, which is this idea that you work and work and work and work and work, and success is ultimately 999 failures followed by one smashing success. So it's literally you're pushing, you're pushing, you're pushing, you're pushing. Nothing's working. Nothing's working. You're not getting what you want. You're maybe not breaking through. You're practicing. It's funny. My kids love playing football now that we're, here in Texas. Of course, I'd love for them to play tennis, just like my parents did for me. But they want to play football. And the 6-year-old, he really was having a hard time catching the ball, but he had so much passion and perseverance about learning how to catch. And, catching the ball is one of those things where, okay, maybe you have it naturally. So, from the time you're 2 or 3, you're catching the ball. But if you don't, you just got to keep trying. You got to keep practicing. And I have been up to here disgusted practicing with my 6-year-old because he will not catch anything. He's like the Butterfingers of all Butterfingers, right? Because the reality is, if you practice 10 days, you don't get better 1/10 every day. You don't see it. It's not like as soon as you do something, you get, all the benefit back. But after 10 days, there are things that you're better at. And then you stack more 10 days, another 10 days, another 10 days, another 10 days, right? And so in every one of those moments where I experienced failure, I didn't know that I was going to ultimately succeed. Of course, I wanted to. But the thing I didn't do is I didn't quit. I never quit. And I always looked for reasons to keep going versus looking for reasons to stop. And the second piece is, I don't know how people start companies by themselves. Jeff Bezos, of course, you've all heard of him, founder of Amazon, started it by himself, right? Steve Jobs started Apple with someone else. Larry Page started Google with someone else. Elon Musk started Tesla by himself. I don't know how people do that. I started 3 companies, never by myself. So I always have people around me, because what I find is when you have great people around you, not only do they help you build value, but the highs feel so much higher. The lows are not nearly as low. Kirk, if you don't mind, do you want me to hit some of these questions?
Yeah,
do you have questions for me?
We'll bring some people up to talk about it. I wanted to kind of we'll get into some of that. I think part of your journey, I mean, you're just hitting on such important topics that we talk about. I mean, we had Dr. Lair do our orientation, and so everything from leading with story, the power, the powerful engagement. A lot of why ICL Academy is blending that character, service, and leadership with the applications. How do you apply things? Because I just thought in your journey, going from football to tennis, then going from sort of pre-med to business, as we've gotten older, I think we see more synergies, and I kind of wish I had them at a young age, like the why we do this, or why is this important. I think a lot of people when they're younger, there's a big focus on the training. Why should I learn physics, or why should I do this? We try to talk about the why, but I think, can you give some of that perspective you had in founding all of those companies, and then actually like being on the flip side and applying that even on something like Shark Tank and deciding, looking for entrepreneurs? What are some of those kind of lessons that you can compile?
It's a great question. I'm a big believer that business is a sport. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not sure that this is, I don't want to blow this out of proportion and say sports are, reflective of all things in life. But honestly, I think the lessons we learn in sports can be applied to almost anything, whether it's starting a company or a relationship. A marriage is a hard thing to make work. Raising kids is hard to do the way that you really want to do, right? And so for me, it has always come down to 3 things. It's come down to vision, values, and work ethic. And so let me talk about all 3 of them. Vision, there's an old saying, I was part of this thing called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, which was sort of like a support group for CEOs, or like therapy for CEOs. And, you'd go in there and talk with other CEOs, and we'd all be sitting there complaining about what we didn't like. And, it's much easier to diagnose something when you're hearing about it versus living it. Because when you're living it, you're sort of in it and you can't see it clearly. And so we'd hear someone else's problems. We'd say, oh, that'd be so easy to fix, right? But then we realized that in order to really change something in your life, your vision for what the other side of that change is going to look like has got to be greater than whatever it's going to cost you to change your behavior, right? So as an example, you want to, one of these questions, did you ever think of going pro in tennis? I mean, of course I thought about it, and I would have loved to do it. When I was at Bollettieri's, Agassi was training there. I think Jennifer Capriati was training there. Jim Lair was there.
Monica might have been there.
Monica was definitely there. In fact, I used to play ping pong with Monica's brother, Zoltan. I think I told you that, Kirk. He was ambidextrous. It was very strange to like smash a ping pong ball cross court, and he would calmly take the paddle from one hand to another, smash it back, right? That was pretty frustrating. So I thought about going pro a lot. I wasn't good enough. And whatever it was going to take for me to get better, whether that meant practicing more, sacrificing other things in my life, whatever it took, that cost was more expensive to me than the value of my vision or the power of my vision to be a pro tennis player. And so, vision is something that enables you to change the way you're operating, because you want to reach for something that's a little further than where you're reaching today. So vision to me is critical. Values means, what's the underlying reason that you're doing something? Okay, so you have a vision. I have a vision. I want to be a billionaire. Okay, fine. You want to make a lot of money, right? You want to be a billionaire. Why? Right? If I asked Kirk, if Kirk said to me, I want to be a billionaire, I'd say, okay, interesting. Why do you want to be a billionaire? I know what Kirk would say. Kirk would say, because I think poverty is a huge issue and I want to be able to give back at scale and somehow push against this incredible crisis of poverty. Or he would say, I think homelessness is a huge issue and I want to do something. His real passion, as you guys know, is education. And so he'd probably say, I want to give free education to anyone who deserves it, right? Because for Kirk, the vision may be to make a lot of money, but the values, and I've known him, for a couple of decades, the values have always been about giving back and helping people live better lives. And so the vision is one thing. That's sort of the thing that you're shooting for. The values are the why. So the vision, sort of the what, the values are the why, and then finally work ethic is how. I don't believe, besides luck and being a sweepstakes winner, I really don't believe that anything in life is accomplished without grinding. And I don't have to tell you guys this. I mean, are there any people who are as competitive in their fields as athletes who don't work their butts off? No, none, not a single one, right? So those skills that you guys are using to grind, I mean, those are going to come in handy in everything you do. Everything you do. I just want to quickly, I see this question.
Well, we'll bring them up because Mikhail, you're there. Do you want to ask a follow-up about the going pro in tennis? You can throw out a tennis question, but if you can turn your video on, I know that it's always more fun.
How about you? You probably are thinking of going pro in tennis.
Exactly.
Yeah, I am. Another question I have is, when you were at the IMG, at that time, were you at like a similar level with all those other people that went pro?
No, as I said, I was ranked, top 20 in Texas. And so that certainly was an elite level, but it was a big eye opener to me. I grew up in a small city. I mean, Odessa was small. And, for football, it was world class. For tennis, it wasn't. And so I think in high school, I lost maybe 2 or 3 matches, in 3 years. And then I get to Bollettieri's and, I watch Monica grunting up a storm,
whacking us all away. Monica scared us all.
100 miles an hour. And I thought to myself, I don't think I can compete with that. Like that's a different level. And so, at the same time, if you asked me when I go on Shark Tank, I got Mark Cuban who owns the Mavericks and I got all these other giants of business. They didn't awe me. They didn't make me feel like I was like, a mini me and, I was looking up to them. I didn't feel like I was some stud on there, right? But I felt really proud of what I'd accomplished in the business world. And I felt like, given the opportunity, I knew how to go reach for the stars and achieve something. Tennis for me was different because tennis I did as a kind of reaction to not being able to play football. And it was just really humbling to realize that, honestly, I may have had the vision to be a really good tennis player. My values were not really there. And, these 3 things, vision, values, and work ethic, they aren't separable from each other. They all have interplay, right? So if you have the right values, it's going to be easier for you to put in the work ethic. If you have work ethic, it's going to be easier for you to formulate your vision, right? I mean, they're not separate. They're all interrelated and they're sort of symbiotic and working with each other. And really, it was not called IMG at the time. It was just Nick Bollettieri's Tennis Academy. And it was just an eye opener to me that there were people in the world that wanted what I wanted much more badly than I did. And they were willing to outwork me for it. And, that's a tough moment because you're sort of like, whoa, I mean, I thought I was something and I realized I really wasn't. And so the question is, what am I going to do about it? Right. And it was humbling.
but those lessons go, I think at the end of the day, Nirav and I were at a similar pathway, but you use those skills, you use the discipline, like what you applied in tennis into life, into starting those businesses, because those relationships, even with yourself, to get back up, even after you vomit in the trash cans, even though you're not going to be a Tommy Haas or a Jim Curry, or being able to go out, we always talk about the impact of sports on your life, but it is really important, because if you single track yourself and you think, oh, I have to just do business and I don't have time for tennis or pursuing other things, you realize that actually as you get older, they all mesh together, because some of the greatest ideas, like the working out, the lessons that you learned that you think aren't applicable in your training are incredibly applicable in those late nights and persevering through tough decisions. I don't want to steal the thunder of some of the questions, because they are up here. So,
but to your point, I mean, I want to say something, which is, business people love hiring former athletes, because they know that former athletes understand sacrifice. Former athletes understand being single-minded. Former athletes understand work ethic. And so we used to love hiring athletes. I mean, not to mention the fact that athletes hate losing, right? I mean, what kept you motivated when you're faced with multiple setbacks? Well,
let's bring Sarah up here. Sarah, you come say hi. Thanks, Mikhail.
A lot of times, Sarah, what kept me motivated was, a deep-seated fear of failing. It was not something noble. It was insecurity. It was ego. It was the idea that, my parents have given me everything. How can I let them down? Or I've always been successful. How can I not be successful now? Right. And I think it's okay to admit that. I mean, that's reality. I mean, a lot of what we do is driven more by pain than it is by pleasure, strangely, right? The pain of losing is sometimes a greater motivator than the pleasure of winning, right? But you got to keep it in perspective. You have to keep it back in perspective. And so, again, I believe that when we look back on things, we tend to glamorize them. We tend to forget how hard things are. And we tend to, look back and say, oh yeah, it all made so much sense, right? In reality, I mean, life is not a straight line. In fact, we typically say that most people think that building a successful company or a successful career in whatever you want looks like this as a line. In fact, what we believe it looks like is this. It's like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And hopefully the highs are a little bit more than the lows. And so your slope ends up being positive. And so even though you're going up and down, you are moving up and to the right. And so you start here, you go up, 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 but where you end is a higher point than where you began, right? But you guys know this, it's messy.
Yeah,
right?
it's Sarah, overcoming injuries, like, it's the same setbacks, right? In tennis, or a bad loss, or, quarterly earnings. Like, you could actually lay out and do a class on the parallels between business and starting up a business, finding the right coach, getting the right routine. How do you, it takes a while to see things going, and it's frustrating, because maybe you see your talent, or you can do better, your business is there, but it's just not gelled yet. And so, having the ability to have those setbacks, how we deal with setbacks. And obviously we start our year with the Rudyard Kipling poem, if you can treat triumph and disaster and those two imposters just the same. That's sort of at the ethos of what it is, because just like when you ask John McEnroe, or a Michael Jordan, the feeling of a Grand Slam win, McEnroe's was a little bit cheapened, because Michael Jordan says, I remember the 1,200 free throws that I shot during my senior prom, whereas John McEnroe came a little easier to him. He didn't have the same work ethic. It's like, if you're given $1 billion, or if your company, if you ask Nirav, it's like that longer stretch, like that effort put in makes that victory so much sweeter. It's not the number in your bank account, it's not the measure of how many dollars you have, how many trophies. But thank you so much for the question, Sarah. And I know you went through injuries and you're coming back, so you felt that setback. But are you all good now? You ready? All right,
Ready
good.
to go. Thank you.
Let's
Thank
bring Thea up. Thea has a really good question as well. She's an entrepreneurial spirit. Thea has won more of the tournaments that I tried to play at that I would lose first round in, and leading all the bowls. But good to see you, Thea. How are you?
Hey, Thea.
Hello, I'm doing well. Hello, nice to meet you.
You as well. All right, hit me.
So I really want to start a business one day, but I do not know I don't know where to start or like where to find my motivation, because anything I think of these days, some version of that already exists. And I was wondering if you have any tips on that.
Well, first of all, what you said is exactly true. There's no such thing as a new idea. Not at this point. Everything is an improvement on something that already exists. So the fact that any ideas you have, you find some versions of those ideas out in the wild, that's just the way it's going to be, right? At least in terms of the industries that are emergent in the world today. Typically, we as entrepreneurs, if we try to create a formula, if you will, around starting a new company, there are a couple of different ways that you can do it. One is companies are started because people have personal pain points and they want to solve those personal pain points. So it's not that they think, oh, the addressable market for this is, X millions of people. And if I just get 30% of them and I charge them $10 a month, boom, I have 100 million in revenue and I can take a company public and ... It's much more, I had an issue every morning when I woke up. I was late, and so I invented the alarm clock. And it's not that I thought there was a huge market for alarm clocks. I just needed to make sure that I woke up on time. And the classic example of a company like that in my field, the tech field, is Google. Google was created by two grad students at Stanford who simply wanted a better way to search the web themselves. They did not have any business background. They were not looking around saying, hey, are there search engines? Okay, there aren't search engines, so I'm going to create one. In reality, there were tons of search engines, right? But what they did is solve a problem that they had themselves, and they did it in not just a little bit better way than what existed, they did it in a much better way, right? So that's, from a formula standpoint, one of the things you can do is you can say, what are the issues that I myself am frustrated by? And if I came up with a solution for those frustrations, is that a solution that is 10 times better than what exists? And if it is, how many other people would want that solution as well? So that's sort of one way to do it. Another way is the way Jeff Bezos started Amazon. And he looked very formulaically at where the world was going. And when he started Amazon, it was 1992. The internet was still very, very, very young. But the data point that he pointed to was the internet had a growth rate that was something like 5,000% a year. So 5,000% more people were using the internet every single year. And he looked at that and he said, well, geez, if you just take 5,000% growth and you put that over 5 or 6 years, that ends up being a really big number. So I think that I'm going to skate where the puck is going. There's a great sports quote. I think it's Gretzky. Well, Gretzky is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, which is actually one of my favorites, right? But another hockey saying is, you skate where the puck is going, not where it is today. So from a formula standpoint, what you could say is, you could say, okay, if I take a step back and I think to myself, where is the world going? And in that future vision of the world, where can businesses be created? So I'll give you a couple of examples that everyone's talking about. A lot of people believe that the world is going to a virtual version of everything, a metaverse, right? And so there are people who are trying to create businesses on the metaverse. Is it going to happen or is it not going to happen? We don't know, but that is one way to make a bet. A lot of people believe that Bitcoin and other cyber currency will become as powerful as the currency we have today. So they're building businesses on that. I believe that artificial intelligence is something that's going to revolutionize a lot of industries. So that's an area where you could go, and there would be a lot of, what we call sort of, there's a saying, blue ocean, red ocean. Red ocean is where there's a lot of competition, so there's blood in the water. But blue ocean it's a relatively new area, so there aren't a lot of people that are competing in it. I think, and I've talked to Kirk about this a little bit, I think life extension and sort of treating healthcare as preventive versus reactive. So if you think about medicine, the history of medicine over the last 100 years, it's mostly been, okay, someone's got cancer. What are we going to do to rid the body of that cancer, right? I think where the world may be going, I believe it's going is, how do we prevent that cancer from occurring in the first place, right? So the reason I bring up these examples are, you aren't going to find something brand new. There are too many people, there are too many smart folks out there running around coming up with great ideas, but you will be able to identify spaces that are brand new, and then you can make a bet. If you're not that kind of person, right, which is fine, then what I encourage you to do is look at the things that frustrate you on a daily basis and think to yourself, okay, what solutions could I come up to those things? And then you start thinking a little bit more broadly into how many more people could benefit from those solutions.
That's awesome. By the way, Thea, you just got the real masterclass without having to get a subscription to masterclass. But we're going to go into a lot more. And I think, as we have our series on business and entrepreneurship, the only add-on would be, also think to yourself, what are you passionate about? And what, sometimes you can find a change for something that's not done effectively in your life. I mean, we hear a lot of the speakers that you've heard in ICL talk about, oh, I wish I had something like ICL. Why wasn't there a school? Like when we were at Bolletary, they didn't care about education. Had there been an integration of what we're doing on court within school, it could have been a very different world. Not that I didn't reinvent the wheel. I didn't create something in education that wasn't kind of somehow available. The pieces were there before, just like even with Nextdoor, with Nirav, I mean, these companies, you could shop on the internet, but people weren't really talking together. You could have chat rooms or neighborhoods, but it's really looking at things and in a deep way and find an area that could change them. And I think
you will hear, I mean, when you start a business, you're going to hear 99% of the people saying, oh, doesn't that already exist? Or, why does the world need that? Right? It's just sort of the nature of the beast. I mean, if it were obvious, 1,000 people would be doing it. It's just, it's just sort of the way it works, right? So it's got to be something that's not so obvious, that's not so common in terms of thought. And, that's where you can be a poet. You can create your version of whatever you want to exist in the world. And that's one of the things that I think is so special about being an entrepreneur, that creation moment.
And Tiger, get up here, because now we're moving into like that Shark Tank territory. A little background. Thanks so much, Thea. Good luck on everything. Your background.
Thank you so much.
So,
Thank you.
Tiger's dad was one of those players where, I worked really hard to try to make the Dartmouth tennis team, and Tiger's dad was #1 all 4 years and was dominating. So now I have to get back at him by playing dingles with Tiger. But
there you go.
Tiger was our first big proponent of Shark Tank. So Tiger, you have your shark here. Let's hear it.
You're on mute. You got on mute.
Wow, we have to mute Tiger once in a while. This is not the first time he's been muted. Got nothing, but you're giving a motivational speech. I know you're asking something important.
I mean, I see his question over here. Right. So should we just go to the
table? Yeah, is that your question? All right, let's go for it.
It says, hey, this is Tiger. Back to Kurt's question about ICL going on Shark Tank. I was wondering if there's a world where there could be a celebrity Shark Tank show. Today, we are seeing more and more celebrities and influencers creating companies with their platforms. Was that the question? You can give a thumbs up if that was the question. Yeah. You have identified one of the largest trends in this connected world, which is a movement from companies and brands to individuals. So before, the platforms that really mattered were platforms like Shark Tank, which is a brand of a show. Whereas increasingly, the platform is Kim Kardashian. The platform is Tiger Woods. The platform is Michael Jordan, right? And I mean, what's interesting to me about a lot of these athletes these days is if they come out with their own clothing brands that don't even have Nike, Adidas, or any of the other big guys involved, it just doesn't matter because people want to buy Jordans. They don't really even care that Jordans are made by Nike, right? So the short story is I agree with you. The idea behind Shark Tank, though, is one where you have really talented entrepreneurs who don't have the same resources in terms of getting the word out and getting funding to get up and running. Whereas with celebrities, I think that celebrities have the opposite problem. They have so many people willing to help them do things. And when Kirk was living in New York, he knew every celebrity in New York. Now he knows everyone in LA. And we used to laugh all the time because we'd meet these celebrities and they all had thousands of ideas and they were doing less than 1% of them. Like they would talk about ideas, but they wouldn't actually do anything, right? And so I think it would be interesting to have a celebrity Shark Tank. I think that the challenge would be less setting that up, and the challenge would be much more about, I think, can we get these celebrities and influencers to actually create value?
And
Because
I think part of it was Tiger was getting at, but didn't put in the chat, was sort of these social, if you can make a celebrity one, which is for social good, at the end of the day, the social entrepreneurship, getting causes out there that, I think so much of our society has been like, I want it quick. I want the bling, the fact that you can get 1 million followers and get paid $100,000 for a post. It's like, how do you turn that into a meaningful way to help society in some way? So,
well, there was a model before, which you see with some of the wealthiest people in the world, which is they would go be great business people and they would make a lot of money. And then at some point they would retire and then they would focus on philanthropy. That was sort of the model. What I find so exciting about today is we're saying, look, you don't have to wait until after you're successful to make the world a better place. You don't have to sacrifice building a successful business because you think that can only happen without giving back. You can actually give back and build a successful business all at the same time, right? And so the same way, I mean, when you guys, Kirk brought up John McEnroe, I mean, you guys remember Mac? I mean, what did we call him? The brat, like, Mac and brat. I mean, the guy would like break rackets left, right, and center. I mean, and now people meet him, they're like, oh, he's a lot more mellow. Well, did he actually have to stop playing tennis to get mellow, right? No. I mean, I think if you look at Federer, you have the gentleman champion, right? Nadal, gentleman champion. I mean, Novak, I mean, besides the few little poetic licenses that he has around whether or not he has COVID or whether or not he's been vaccinated, right? I mean, Novak, very good sport, very good guy, right? And so this idea that you can be a winner in life as well as on the court or on the field, I think that's really powerful.
That's awesome. And really powerful. So we'll keep that, Tiger. We'll still keep that up. Jack, we're gonna go to you next, and then probably wrap it up with there are a couple other of the anonymous questions that are interesting as well. But Jack, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Jack.
So growing up, you said that tennis and academics were both very important to you, and you chose to go to Stanford and try and walk on. Could you just describe your thought process there, opposed to going to a different academic school that you could play tennis for?
It's such a great question, because I actually thought about playing tennis at Harvard, and Harvard's team was a lot less competitive than Stanford's. And so I would have been able to play there. And, Harvard's obviously a great academic school as well. I want to answer the question a little bit more broadly. When we typically have interns in my company and I have lunch with them and they ask me, how should they be thinking about their career? And, how would you make a decision on going to Stanford versus going somewhere else? I typically give them a metaphor that someone gave me when I was young that I found really helpful. And the metaphor is, imagine there are 3 rings and the 3 rings are connected. And what you're trying to find is the intersection point where all 3 of the rings connect. And the 3 rings are, what am I passionate about? What am I good at? Meaning, and really the way that I typically say it is, on the passion, like, what would I rather do than anything else in life? The second thing is, what am I better at than anyone else? And then the third ring is, where do I have the most financial leverage? In other words, like, where can I get paid for doing this thing? And most people, if they're lucky, they get 2 of the 3 rings. And I'll give you some examples. So let's say that you woke up in the morning and you said, I really want to be a 2nd grade teacher. It's a thing I'm passionate about. I really want to teach kids. I think it's really valuable and I'm super good at it. Okay. So, you're passionate about it, you're good at it, but then that third ring is where do you have financial leverage? Now, whether it's right or wrong in today's world, do we pay a lot of money to second grade teachers? No, we don't. Now, let's look at a field where we do pay a lot of money, investment bankers. Okay, so an investment banker comes up and says, okay, I'm a banker. I'm getting paid a lot of money. I'm really good at it, but man, I hate my job. Like when I wake up in the morning, I want to put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger because I really don't like what I'm doing, right? So that's two of the three rings as well. Now, let me get back to your question, which is I chose to go to Stanford because going to Bolletari's made me realize that what was really important to me was to try to be top 1% in something. That was just something that, like, when I think about my vision, that was something that I had a vision for, which is I wanted to be great and I wanted to be a winner and I wanted to try to do so at the highest possible level. And when I got to Bolletari's and I realized not only am I not as good as Agassi and some of these others, but they're way better than I am, like way, 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 way better. I realized that, at least in my mind, tennis for me was going to be where I could be competitive, but I could never be world class. And again, it was a very humbling thing, but that was a moment of honesty. And at that point I said, okay, well, where can I be world class? At the time I thought it was being a doctor. I wanted to be a world-class surgeon. My dad has been a world-class surgeon. He's retired now, but I wanted to follow in his footsteps. You know, I think probably Mr. Spahn thinks a lot about his father, who's an unbelievable educator and has done phenomenal things. And that's always going to be one of the giants that Mr. Spahn wants to stand on his shoulders, right? So he had a vision for that. I had one as well. I felt that Stanford could help me get there to being a world-class surgeon. Now, ironically, I couldn't be the world-class surgeon, but if I'd never gone to Stanford, I never would have been exposed to Silicon Valley. And if I never would have been exposed to Silicon Valley, I never would have been an entrepreneur. And if I never would have been an entrepreneur, you know, ... So for me, it was a very humbling moment to realize that I wasn't going to be world-class in tennis, but it created the opportunity for me to look out and have a vision of where I could be world-class. And Stanford was going to be the enabler of that.
I love it. There you go. All right, Jack, we expect, by the way, when you're ready to apply to Stanford, you know,
I'm here for you, man. I'm here for you.
You know, Nirav,
Awesome. Thank you.
It's pretty funny. So I don't know, by the way, just for our students that are there, you're probably all typing and knowing, no, that was not a setup at all whatsoever. Because as we know that Nirav just went through 3 of the 4 petals of our ikigai. So the Japanese expression for basically finding your purpose or, you know, your life's meaning is through ikigai. And it was taking something you're passionate about. What are you good at? Sorry, what do you love? What are you good at? What can you make money doing? And then our last petal is what's good for the world. So, you know, that ikigai is sort of in the fabric. We actually, in all of our classes and discussions, you have to fill out ikigai at the end of the semester. So we appreciate that. Was not a setup in any way, but glad that you can see that successful entrepreneurs are on the same page. You know, quickly, I think we'll end with the last question about a decision you would change or something you would tell to the 15-year-old you, but we'll start with that one of when it comes to dealing with business money, because, you know, when you think entrepreneur, you think business, you think just dollar signs, and that's been very different than your path.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, this is a great question. When it comes to dealing in business, the money that comes and goes, what's your mentality when dealing with it, coming and going? How do you stay positive? When Nextdoor went public, the market cap was, you know, or the stock went up to $18 a share, and it's trading at $3 now. So my personal net worth, you know, insofar as it's tied up in Nextdoor, which it is down 70%. So, you know, even if it were only $100 to go,
and you're
from
still smiling, and
30,
you're still with a smile on your face.
If it goes from $100 to a 30, it's pretty painful. So I'll tell you what has been interesting for me. My parents are immigrants. They have great values. They've never been flashy. They don't like taking loans. They don't like leveraging themselves. When it comes to money, they've been very conservative. And that also influenced the way that I thought about money. My parents also taught me from a young age that money is never a measure of self-worth. It's just freedom. Okay. So a lot of people think, oh, that person's rich, that person's impressive. I've never really thought that. I mean, I think I've met a lot of really impressive people who have no money, and I've met a lot of really underwhelming people who are filthy rich. And so I don't really see a correlation between money and how good a person you are, how impressive person you are. Now, what I do think is smart is living within your means. And if you are lucky enough to have a hit here or there, typically what I say is, look, pretty simple formula, 30% of whatever you make, save it. 30% of whatever you make, spend it, because it'll make you feel good. And then the last 30%, think about what you'd rather do. Would you rather spend it? Would you rather save it? Right. And then you're not sort of always in this, I saved everything, I spent everything, you know, and I found that to be very liberating. Live within your means. Don't put yourself out on an island where you've borrowed a lot of money. And so you need something crazy to happen to bail yourself out. And then finally, it's okay to spend a little bit, to let the air out of the balloon, right? But all that said, it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy because mentally we start living in a world where this paper money is real. And then when the paper money gets cut significantly, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy. And it's not easy for me right now, right? So I try not to think about it. Let me just hit this. If you could change one decision you made during your life, what would it be? I'm actually not a huge believer in regrets, and I'm not a huge believer in feeling like I could go back and change the past, because I sort of always want to be looking forward. I always want to be focused on the things that I can control. That said, I have made so many mistakes that I'm not proud of, ashamed of, which I'd never done. I think probably the biggest thing is I let many decisions in my life be driven by ego and insecurity. And most of the time, when that was how I was coming to a decision, I would end up paying for it, because my ego would cause me to exaggerate a little bit, and I'd get smacked because I got exaggerated. My ego would lead me to not treating people the right way, and then that ultimately wouldn't work out, right? And it was only when I got a little bit older and I realized that I didn't care what people think about me. What I care about is how I judge the way I'm living my life. That was really a huge weight off of my shoulders. And that gave me the ability to really make music, you know, to really be creative and to really let my soul sing, which is when I'm most successful. But when I was motivated, and even today, when I'm motivated by this thing that we all have, which is, what do other people think of me? Right? I mean, do they think I'm cool? Do they think I'm smart? Do they think I'm successful? Do they think I'm impressive? Right? Those are the times when I'm the smallest version of myself. And I don't want to be small, right? I want to be big and powerful, and I want to have my heart sing in whatever I'm doing. And it can only happen when I find a way to take my ego out of the equation and do things, you know, sort of for the love of the game.
Well, I mean, it's huge. It's so helpful. I mean, everyone, you know, Jelani's mom made the comment there at the end, you know, how important it is. And I hope, you know, already there have been messages back and forth, you know, how great it is to hear this. And you know, we have series that are great athletes. We have series that are great philanthropists, entrepreneurs. You know, you really do resonate, and you represent what ICL has been all about. And so it's been an honor to have you. I will put you on the spot and say, I do not want this to be our last time. As you know, I can be persuasive in getting you, and I know how busy you are, but this is truly amazing for our students. And, you know, it was a huge thank you.
No, look, I'm very grateful to you, because, you know, the future of the world is on your shoulders, not mine. I mean, I've had my time, and I've had so many blessings, and, you know, there were so many people I looked up to that inspired me. I hope something I've said, at the very least, can help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made. I hope that you will continue to be inspired and to inspire others. And, you know, you've given me a ton of energy, because talking about this stuff reminds me what's really important. And the youth, it's your responsibility to make this a better world, for my kids and your kids. And I know you will.
Thank you so much, Nirav. Thanks. And look forward to seeing you very soon, in a couple of days.
All the
Thanks,
best, guys. Thanks for having me.
joining. Thanks. Take care.
All right.
Say hi to your parents and the whole family.
I will. See you. Bye.